Today I'm going to go over the lab for our second hack. We're going to go over some introduction, vulnerability scan tools, CSRF and XSS, vulnerabilities that were found within the scans, the flaw hypothesis methodology, vulnerability analysis and mapping, tools and tracing, and vulnerability disclosures. So the first thing I did was just an analysis of the NICTO versus OWASP-ZAP. NICTO is a command line based scanning tool that checks for known vulnerabilities in CGI scripts. It's mainly used for testing web servers for vulnerabilities or programs that could harm your devices or networks. OWASP-ZAP is a GUI-based application, scans to assess web applications. It's capable of scanning for vulnerabilities, but also able to act as like a proxy, so it's able to intercept the requests as well. Both of these softwares can be utilized in order to detect vulnerabilities. However, of the two types, OWASP-ZAP does have greater capabilities. So cross-site request forgery, or also known as CSRF, it's a type of attack that tricks a user into performing an action they didn't want to perform. It usually occurs when a malicious website or application sends requests to a legitimate application or website on behalf of the user. Always happens without their knowledge. It most commonly results in personal information being leaked or sometimes data manipulation. So cross-site scripting, or XSS, is a type of attack that involves injecting malicious client-side scripts into either web pages or applications. It allows the attackers to gain control of these web pages in order to be able to steal information. To prevent these attacks, websites and applications need to implement proper input validation. So next we're going to go over the vulnerabilities. These are the vulnerabilities that I found included in the screenshots that I have later on, as well as in the Word doc that I sent. These vulnerabilities are examples of what could occur in a company, as well as the ones in particular that I found there are included in the screenshots. So the first one, the Apache message, refers to the Apache web server software. The easy fix for this particular message that I received is just updating, which I included the command there. The second, the X-XSS protection header isn't defined. This occurs when a web application when data enters the web application through an untrusted source. In order to fix this message, you would need to set your XSS protection header. The cookie PHP message, this occurs when the HTTP only attributes cookie values cannot be read. In order to fix this, you can set the HTTP only flag to all cookies. And then the last one here is the anti-clickjacking message. This means the website could be at risk of a clickjacking attack. The fix for this one is ensuring that the content isn't embedded into other sites. Here are some additional vulnerabilities. Again, these were ones that I found from the OWASP scan. The previous ones were from the NICTO scan. So the first message, the content security policy, is a way to detect and mitigate against the XSS and injection attacks. And in order to do this, again, setting a standard header that is available for use, kind of similar to one of the previous messages that we received as well. The second one, server leaks information, is referring to a web or application is leaking information via one or more of the HTTP response headers. In order to prevent this or fix this, we want to ensure that we understand the framework and components that are at risk. The third one, absence of anti-CSRF tokens. This one found that there were no anti-CSRF tokens found, which could make you vulnerable to a CSRF attack. In order to prevent against this one, just protecting your browser and watching the sites that you are accessing, being cautious. Lastly, cookies, no HTTP only flag. This is a vulnerability using malicious script. In order to fix this one, you could enable or disable all cookies, so this does not occur. So next we're going to talk about the flaw hypothesis methodology. It is a systems analysis and penetration prediction technique where a list of flaws in the software system are compiled through analysis and documentation of the system. This methodology does have 5 steps: information gathering, the flaw hypothesis, testing, generalization, and flaw elimination. After gathering the information and determining your hypothesis, the testing stage is actually really important because if after testing it doesn't match your hypothesis, you are able to go back and change that hypothesis before going ahead and retesting that information. So vulnerability mapping, this is one of the screenshots for one of the scans that I conducted. I liked this one more just because it showed the different vulnerabilities and specifically which ones were low to high risk. This really can help you put into perspective which ones that you need to address first. Obviously anything with high risk for either a personal or company level should be the first things that we address. And we're going to go over how to address these and prevent them in the next few slides. So as we discussed earlier, the OWASP and NICTO scans I did complete. The 2 tools were pretty similar. However, after completing the scans, the OWASP tool was significantly superior. NICTO did provide a longer list of vulnerabilities overall, however, it gave no context, and I had to look up each of the vulnerabilities individually, where OWASP provides significant detail, including the location of the vulnerability, the level of risk, a description, and what it means. OWASP made it very easy to trace the vulnerability, and with that information, you could use it to prevent against it as well. It was a little harder to get that installed, which I put in the Word doc as well, but once I was able to get it successfully installed, it was definitely the superior of the 2. So based on all this other information, our scans and our findings, there's several different possible attack vectors that would be possible for us, specifically due to web pages and pop-ups. So attackers may be able to gain access to us due to poor encryption, as well as SQL injections. Based on the data that we found, it's very possible for that to be one of the attack vectors. This would put any of our personal identifiable information at risk, specifically on websites. So anything that we have saved could be at risk due to these. So the main question is, with these type of vulnerabilities that we just learned about, how do we prevent them? So I did find and do some research. These are the best methods to prevent against them, using anti-CSRF tokens, using same-site cookies, using filter upon arrival, encoding the data on output, implementing WAFs, ensuring to only open messages from recognized senders, avoiding using auto login or autofill, although convenient, not super safe, clearing your browsing data regularly, as well as ensuring that devices and browsers are up to date. And lastly, vulnerability disclosures. So when should a company disclose that there's the chance of a vulnerability? When it comes to vulnerability disclosures, the three major categories to consider are legal, ethical, and industry. Legal ramifications are important to ensure that the chance of a risk is given to a client. Not disclosing the disclosure, especially in situations like healthcare or companies that handle certain sensitive information, could result in legal action against the company whose servers or information was accessed and the client's data was released. Disclosing this vulnerability, however, could open the door to litigation against the company or individual who discovered it, as well as further legal action against the company whose servers were hacked. Ethical implications occur when there is a question of whether the public should be aware of the disclosure. Ethical considerations are harder because they're subjective. So what one person feels is unethical may not be to someone else. So that one's not really taken into account as much. And lastly, industry standards for disclosures can vary depending on the type of industry. For example, in retail or cyber community or companies that deal with a lot of either personal information, payment information, there are generally standards as to what should be available to the customers or consumers. Overall, I think it's beneficial for a company to disclose the possibility of vulnerabilities when that data is known. This way, at the point, if it's the consumer-based company or program, if the consumer chooses to take the risk, they were made aware of the possibility of a vulnerability ahead of time. Thank you and have a great night.